Hi, my name's Tim, Coach, Recovery Coach Tim, and Tim Ledbetter, and this is part of a series. Last time we talked about was how people have their experiences in life, early life determines what their characters are, determines what their attitudes are, and it's based on their perception of what happened to them in the first, say, six years of their life. And you can see that those influences are kind of, I call the filters. These are the filters that all of life will go through. These images will be there in their subconscious, and they will actually determine kind of how the child sees the world. But the next thing that's formed that we like to talk about, especially in recovery, are our characters. Of course, we talk about character defects a lot and those kind of things, but we're talking about characters. And characters are perceptions that a human being will pick up on, that they will determine based on their circumstances, based on the evidence that they see. These are the kind of things that they need to survive. These are the characters that they will say that this will get the goodies in life. That if I put on this kind of character, if I am this kind of character, if I do this kind of situation, then things will work out. And of course, most of these characters are formed based on a child's influences, things that are in their circumstances. And I like to put them into two big piles, really. One is the influences from the outside in. It's from the family, from the school, from their environment, from their neighborhood, from their church, things like that. Those are influences that will have an effect on the person from the outside in. And then their images are from the inside out. It's how they look at things. They say, well, this is who I am. This is how I like to get along. This is the kind of person I am. This is how I choose to be. And these two things determine the characters that are there. And let me give you kind of an example of that that's been used a lot, especially in describing addiction or an alcoholic family. And it's very simple. It's just a kind of an explanation of what I'm talking about by a character. And I think you'll clearly see this, but this is a typical or the usual way we describe, quote, quote, an alcoholic family. And just to be typical about it, let's say that the father is the alcoholic, that he drinks medicinally, and he's, a functioning alcoholic, but he's clearly using alcohol, and every once in a while he gets in trouble. And then, of course, the wife, we would consider the wife in being what we call an enabler, or a co-addict, if you will. She's addicted to the addict. The addict's addicted to a substance, and the person is addicted to the drama of the addict. And so just to use that as a typical family to get started, just to represent what I mean by character. So we'll talk about the alcoholic. And the enabler. I know this is not typical, and I know it has all these other dynamics to it, and it's not there, but we got to start somewhere. But I just want to explain to you what characters are, where your characters have come from to a certain extent, and give you some perspective, so at least we're on the same page as far as vocabulary is concerned. But let's assume that this is a situation, and they're married. These people get married. They're doing their normal thing. Obviously, the guy's drinking medicinally, and the enabler is doing the things that enablers or co-addicts do. Obviously, getting into religion and getting into prescriptions and stuff like that. That's kind of typical for this. But that's all I'm trying to do is sketch out a typical thing. No family is typical. No person is typical, but it is for explanation, for discussion. But let's say a baby is born into this situation, born into this family. And this family has a lot of dynamics going on. It has a lot of communication. As you know, in the world, the least amount of communication is verbal. Most communication is done by energies and positions and phrases and so forth like that. And so a baby comes into this situation, and the baby says, "This is not working. There's some drama going on. There's a lot of stress going on. There's a lot of fear involved. In fact, there's a lot of apprehension here." And so the child, usually the firstborn, will make a decision based on that information. They'll come to the conclusion that they've got to do their part to hold the family together. This is the influence from the outside in. And this child, the first child, will become what we call psychological stuff, we call the hero. And what that means is that that child chose to be a hero. He's going to sit down and say, in order for me to do my part to keep this family together, I have got to be a super achiever. I've got to be a hero. I've got to get good grades. I've got to be a good athlete. I've got to do all these kind of things, because if I can do those kind of things, it will hold the family together. From a neighborhood kind of thing, and they can say, that must be a really good couple, because look at this beautiful hero that they've created. And that obviously is a hero compared to what the culture says, or what our environment says, or what the circumstances are. And we'll get into a little bit later of what are the consequences if you find yourself choosing or having to choose to be a hero in order to hold the family together. There's some pretty serious consequences to that, and we'll get into that a little bit later, because it really does hurt if you've been decided and you've been kind of forced into being a hero. But let's assume that another child comes along, just for chuckles, and that this child comes in and says, boy, there's still a lot of stress in this family. Things aren't working out. There's a lot of unspoken drama going on. There's got a lot of things going on, but this hero, this other sibling is taking on the hero role, and so they will come to the conclusion, this is energy and power and messaging from the outside in, and this person will decide to become what we call, conveniently, the scapegoat. And this is a character that this child chooses to be. They think they choose it, but really it's in reaction to the influences from the outside in. They've come to the conclusion there's something wrong with this family. I'll hold it together, but I'll be the trouble. You know, like the hero says, there's something wrong with this family. It's not going to be me. I'm going to be perfect. I'm not going to cause any trouble. And the other person says, there's something wrong with this family. It might as well be me. I will be able to psychologically hold this family together by being a troublemaker, because they know when they get a little bit of trouble, the parents come together. They maybe haven't talking for days. They come together to go down and see how little Johnny or little Susie is doing at school or at church or whatever, to explain, and they can't figure out why Susie does this. They can't figure out why Susie does that. Of course, they wish Susie was a little bit more like their brother or sister. He's a hero and they're perfect, but we'll deal with it. And of course, everybody from the outside would say, boy, that must be a really good family. Look at that. They are together, and they got this beautiful child, the hero, and when they have these little incidents and so forth, they all come together and they deal with it. And so this must be a really neat family. So the scapegoat is providing a need for the family, and that decision was made from the outside in. And of course, if you are chosen to be, or you choose to be a scapegoat, there's consequences to that for the rest of your life. There's things that will happen. There are results of this decision that will be a little scary a little later on in life, and we'll get into that specifically. But just for going through this process a little bit to describe more of what I mean by characterization, characters, let's say another child is born into this family. And this family will come in, this child will come in and say, wow, we got a big bunch of problems going on here. We got this superhero, we got a cape on, probably doing super things, and we got this troublemaker going over there. And based on that evidence, based on that thing, the only thing I can be is I will be what we call a lost child. And that's because they have to fit in the middle, and they have to provide that. At least they won't cause any trouble. Now, they're not going to be a hero. They're not going to be a scapegoat. They're the kind of person that can walk through a room and nobody even notice. You ask them opinion and they'll shrug their shoulders. You know, they'll kind of go with anything, and they basically, that's from the information that they can see from the outside in, that's the safest, that's the best, that's the role that they need to play. Okay? And we'll go a little bit further and assume there's a fourth child. It's kind of against the current images in the United States. 4 kids would be, quote, maybe 5 too many. But the fact is that the other child comes in, and we're just talking about characterization, and this person has to create what kind of thing is left, what would be there. And generally speaking, the person that comes in after this would be what we call the mascot. And that's the comic relief. That's the child that will bring in that kind of attitude. They'll laugh at car wrecks. They'll laugh at this. You know, they basically can make jokes at funerals, things like that. They actually bring the comic relief to every situation. And these are the kind of the descriptions of how people have to take on characterizations. They put on a character, and they did it so young and so little that they actually come to the conclusion that that's the kind of character they are, and they have to keep up that kind of characterization. And as you know, as life goes on, those characterizations are hard to keep, especially when you're growing up and have a family of your own and so forth. But let's just talk about this as addiction is concerned. Because it's kind of an interesting kind of a perception. But to show how powerful these characterizations are is that the way the addict will be. And let's just assume that the father, the alcoholic, is just drinks alcohol. And, of course, the enabler is dealing with pressure, dealing with stress, dealing with things. And sometimes they may want to drink or be a drinking partner with the person, try to join them. Things like that, but more than likely they will have other addictions type of things, and the substances that they use will generally be prescriptions. It has to be somebody with a white coat, somebody an authority figure, somebody that says, this is fine for you, you take this, because if you're married to that guy, then you're such a good hero, kind of get up on your cross type of thing, and you take this medication. And of course that cross kind of symbolization, they can also get into religions as a way of trying to take care of the stress of being an enabler. But the hero, being a hero, and you can't keep that up, it's kind of difficult. In fact, the people that study families like this, I always like to ask the question of these people, of this family, who do you think is the one of the kids that dies first? Which is the one that doesn't survive? And of course it runs around, but the answer is the hero. That is the hardest image to keep up. You might be a hero in this family, but you go to high school, it gets a little bit more difficult, and if you go to college, it's much more difficult, and you get out into the business world, it's really difficult. So that ability to be a hero is not a pretty picture, and if they can't keep up that hero, it means they're really, really disturbed, they're really afraid, because they don't know any other characterization, and they can't keep up that character, and so they get chronically depressed. Well, let's talk about the addictions. The hero will use chemicals to artificially make themselves feel better, but they will almost always use the things that are legal. Let's go have a beer, okay? They'll never drink, do anything illegal. They won't do dope. They won't do things marijuana. They will only do things that are legal. The scapegoat can't keep up the scapegoat stuff, but it will need chemicals to artificially keep them going, to keep their characterization, but they will only do things that are illegal. To have a beer for them doesn't make any sense. Who wants to have a beer? Let's just go get high. Anything that's illegal actually matches or fits into their characterization. The lost child generally likes hallucinogens. They don't want to get high. They don't want to get down. They want to get gone. And they're the earphones and the microphones and that kind of a thing, the hallucinogen. And the mascot, interestingly enough, will almost always pick the same kind of chemicals that the father does. It kind of completes the cycle. The merry-go-round called denial, some people call that. But that's what we're talking about characterizations. Now, I have a form that I'm going to have you use when we get through this stuff, and I'm going to have you fill it out. And there are many more other characterizations. These are characters that are formed from the pressure from the outside in, and you'll see that whole list. And from that, I'm going to ask you to kind of do your family tree to see where that comes from. But this is where characterizations come from, and I think this will be part of understanding that and discussing that as part of recovery.